Hello everyone, welcome and good afternoon to you all. When I get into a conversation, I tend to talk about movies a lot. I don't know why, it's just my favorite subject. Movies have been around for ages, and I mean like over 100 years by this point. And I love pretty much any genre really, from, action, comedy, and horror. And when it comes to horror films, people have always been wanting to make their genre the greatest that they can be. And I think the one that popularized that one genre of horror, known as the slasher genre, it goes by the name of Alfred Hitchcock. Say what you will about this man, most people tend to agree that he practically revolutionized Hollywood studio. Like, people have been still talking about him up to this day. And his most popular film, Psycho, is one of his best films to date. And so people don't really tend to talk about how he actually made his film that much, as opposed to like what it did at the box office and such. But don't worry, I've got it all for you. Let's find out how he made this magnificent masterpiece. So, it all started back in the late 50s when Alfred Hitchcock was reading Psycho. Psycho was based on the book of the same name, which was also based on the Ed Gein murders. When Alfred Hitchcock read that piece of artwork, that was when he got the idea to actually make this film, and got the budget of just about over $800,000. Yeah, I know, it sounds pretty cheap now, but back then, it was like $3 to $4 million, baby. But anyway, while we're on the subject, because of how this film cost like $800,000, that meant that actors like Anthony Perkins, who plays Norman Bates, and Vera Miles, who plays Marion Crane's sister, were paid cheap due to them being under contract to the studio who made and financed the film. And you can't talk about Psycho without talking about that famous shower scene. During that shower scene, it was the first ever time that like a studio actually showed a toilet on the big screen. Yeah, I know. Nowadays, a toilet on a screen isn't really much anyways, but again, back then, the Hollywood that we know today isn't really as soft as we knew back then, as they were like strict guidelines of what needed to be done, including not having a single toilet be seen on screen. But Alfred Hitchcock managed to convince his producers otherwise. So, and while we're on the subject of the shower scene, it's best to know that like in this 45-second film, scene, might I remind you, it took a grand total of 78 shots to make that scene. Like, who even thinks that? Clearly Hitchcock does. And I guess not many people ever thought of going that direction for a long period of time. But one of the most strangest occurrences during the film was that, like, in post-production, Hitchcock originally did not want any music behind that scene. Like, can you imagine there being like no music behind like that famous shower scene? Like, it's just like having a cake with no layers. It's just not even a cake. It even like inspired multiple movies nowadays, like Jaws and whatever. But anyway, by the time of the film's release, Hitchcock had this very risky move of actually not allowing anybody into theaters after the movie has actually started. So, because of this, when the film first came out, critics weren't really a fan of it, as Well, but that was mainly because of how like they didn't get to see it in its original release. But afterwards, it became such a phenomenon. Like critics have now hailed it as a masterpiece. Even audiences, even at its release date, have praised it for like its unique visuals and like just its new creative direction. So this film has now shown Alfred Hitchcock into the spotlight, which that nowadays people still proclaim it as a masterpiece, and have since called Hitchcock a quote master of suspense. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed what you have to hear about the history of horror as we know it.